They buried it, pulled it from the air, and acted like it never existed. One episode of Married with Children was deemed too much, even for a show that made a career out of too much. For over a decade it stayed hidden. No broadcast, no home release, no explanation. The cast could not understand why this one crossed a line that nothing else on the show ever had. The writers were stunned, and Fox just went silent. Today, after more than 30 years, the full story of the episode they tried to erase is finally being told. Here is what they did not want you to see, why they killed it, and why it matters more now than it ever did in 1989. To understand why this episode hit so hard, you first need to understand what kind of show Married with Children actually was, and why it terrified the television establishment from day one. When the show premiered on Fox in 1987, American prime time was dominated by sanitized family comedies. Full House, The Cosby Show, Family Ties. Every one of them presented loving, well-adjusted families whose problems were neatly resolved in 22 minutes with a soft piano cue and a hug. Audiences were used to it. Most were beginning to tire of it. Married with Children walked in and torched the entire formula. Al Bundy was not a sensitive father trying to connect with his kids. He was a bitter shoe salesman who hated his job, despised his marriage, and spent every waking hour mourning the high school football glory he would never get back. Peg was not the devoted housewife. She was a shopping-addicted TV addict who rarely cooked and never cleaned, and was proud of it. Their kids were selfish, lazy, and conniving, and the show treated that not as a problem to be fixed, but as a punchline to be celebrated. No moral lessons, no tender moments, just fat jokes, poverty jokes, dirty jokes, and an unrelenting cynicism that felt, for a huge portion of working-class America, like the first honest thing they had ever seen on network television. The show became a phenomenon almost overnight. It also became a target. Critics called it crude and irresponsible. Religious groups launched protests. Politicians cited it as evidence of cultural decay. Network censors flagged scripts constantly. Jokes were rewritten. Scenes were cut. But every single week, the show survived and pushed further, until it did not. The episode was called I'll See You in Court. It was fully produced during the third season and was scheduled to air in 1989. The cast and crew treated it like any other episode. They rehearsed it, they shot it, they wrapped it. And then, Fox executives read the final cut and quietly pulled it from the schedule without a single public statement. The plot, on the surface, sounded like standard Bundy chaos. Al and Peg check into a seedy motel to try to reignite their famously dead marriage. What they do not know is that the motel has been secretly recording guests through hidden cameras. When they discover the footage of their private night together has been viewed and possibly distributed without their knowledge, they do what any Bundy would do: they sue. But when they get to court, they discover that their neighbors the Rhodes were recorded at the same motel, and what follows is a courtroom scene full of testimony so graphic and so awkward that it made even devoted fans of the show uncomfortable. In isolation, the plot sounds like business as usual, but the specific subject matter, non-consensual recording, sexual privacy, and the exposure of intimate footage, was not just edgy for 1989. It was legally and culturally loaded in a way that almost nothing else on television had touched. Fox was still a very young network. It had built its identity on being bold and countercultural, the alternative to ABC, NBC, and CBS. But it was also entirely dependent on advertising revenue, and advertisers were already nervous about the show. When the I'll See You in Court script made its way to the executive level, internal memos indicate that several major ad buyers made clear they were not comfortable having their brands adjacent to jokes about illegal intimate recordings. The math was simple. The episode was a liability. It disappeared. And this is the part of the story that makes everything worse. Because what buried the episode was not just the content itself. It was a woman in Michigan named Terry Rakolta. Rakolta was a mother of 4 who had stumbled across a different Married with Children episode while her children were watching television. The episode she saw was not I'll See You in Court. It was another installment entirely. But what she saw made her furious. She began writing letters, not just to Fox but to the show's sponsors, major corporations. She demanded they pull their advertising. And it worked. Kellogg's pulled out. Coca-Cola pulled out. The story went national. Conservative commentators praised her. Television news ran segments about her campaign. What started as one angry letter became a full cultural flashpoint about what television was allowed to be. Fox, already rattled by the advertiser fallout, suddenly found themselves holding I'll See You in Court, an episode about non-consensual filming and sexual exposure, in the middle of the most public moral panic the network had ever faced. The decision was made quickly and quietly. The episode was pulled, stored, and as the months passed, essentially forgotten. If you are enjoying this story and you want more deep dives into the banned, buried, and nearly erased moments from television history, subscribe right now. We cover these stories every single week, and there is a lot more where this came from. Ed O'Neill later said in interviews that he genuinely could not understand why this particular episode was the one that got pulled. He had delivered monologues about women's hygiene. He had insulted overweight customers to their faces. He had compared his intimate life to a form of punishment in nearly every episode. None of those moments caused the network to flinch. Why this one? Katie Sagal said the script was funny and sharp, and that the motel story was completely consistent with the show's comedic DNA. Al and Peg accidentally becoming unwilling stars of an unauthorized private video was, from her perspective, the most Bundy thing imaginable. Not romantic, not dangerous, just awkward, humiliating, and absurd. She could not understand the panic either. Co-creator Michael G. Moy said later that the episode had passed through normal pre-production approvals without a single red flag. It was only after Ricolta's boycott had reframed the entire advertising environment around the show that Fox began looking at every script differently. I'll See You in Court did not fail because it was worse than what came before it. It failed because it arrived at the worst possible moment. For over a decade, the episode existed only as a rumor. Fans called it the missing episode. Some believed it had never been finished. Others were convinced it had been destroyed. A few swore they had seen a late-night airing somewhere in Canada. None of the stories checked out. But the myth kept growing. Then in 2002, FX, which had acquired the syndication rights to the full Married with Children catalog, quietly slipped the episode into a weekday afternoon rerun block. No announcement, no press release. Just the episode, airing in full, unedited, for the first time in American broadcast history. Fans who happened to be watching recognized it immediately. Early internet forums exploded. Threads went up on fan sites asking if anyone else had just seen what they thought they saw. They had. FX aired it a handful of times before programming changes buried it again, but the impact was lasting. Now fans knew it was real, and they wanted it officially released. The pressure built for years. Cast members were asked about it at every reunion. Entertainment writers covered it in retrospectives. Petition threads circulated. And now, more than 3 decades after it was first pulled, the episode is finally being released properly, remastered in HD, and packaged in a digital collection alongside other banned and buried episodes from classic television, with original commentary from surviving cast members and producers and a short documentary about the entire history of its suppression. The timing is not an accident. In 2025, the themes inside I'll See You in Court are not edgy. They are urgent. The world the Bundys stumbled into in that fictional motel where your private, intimate moments are recorded without your knowledge, stored somewhere and potentially seen by strangers, is now the lived reality of millions of people. Revenge porn, hacked cloud accounts, leaked private videos, surveillance capitalism. The episode that felt too dangerous for television in 1989 now reads like a preview of the world we are all living in. What made executives nervous was not that the jokes were too dirty, it was that the situation was too real. The Bundys, characters defined by their total lack of dignity and power, becoming victims of voyeurism and then being laughed at instead of helped, mirrors something that happens to real people every day and still does not get treated seriously enough. The comedy does not soften the violation, it sharpens it. Laughter does not erase what happened to those characters. It exposes just how easy it is for the most vulnerable people to become spectacle, and how little anyone in a position of power tends to care when they do. That is what Fox was really afraid of in 1989. Not the dirty jokes, the uncomfortable truth underneath them. That is the full story of the episode they tried to erase, and why it hits harder today than it ever could have 30 years ago. The next video is already waiting for you. Go watch it. We will see you there.